prize. It is the president of the jury, Aurel Bax himself, coming on stage with me.
Bonsoir, Edouard. Ça va?
Good evening, Edouard.
Très bien.
Ah, chouette.
Très bien.
How
Très
are
bien.
you? Very
Malgré
well.
les circonstances.
Great. Well,
C'est une très belle soirée.
despite the circumstances, it is a
I
very
switch to
nice
English, if I may.
evening. Je vais
Because the
passer
winner
en
of
anglais,
tonight's
si
prize
je peux me permettre.
and the international audience will certainly understand what I say. I'm going back 35 years ago when the winner of tonight's prize and I had the first small encounter. But more about that later. Today, I'm really pleased that we're celebrating a man who has invested over 60, and I think the average age here amongst the CEOs isn't 60, over 60 years of in life to watchmaking and studying horology, and most importantly, of sharing it. He's one of the very few Swiss watchmakers who not only speaks French and English, but also German, and quite crucially in our field, also other very important languages such as Swiss German and Swahili. His father hoped he would become a watchmaker and sent him to some test with a psychologist who asked the boy, take a pen and complete something around a circle. Of course, he was hoping he would do a wheel, a balance, but he did a sun and told him and the father there is no chance this boy will ever succeed in watches. Needless to say, he successfully studied watchmaking at the Technicum in Bienne. Well, that shows what psychologists know. After his studies, he started at Omega in the service après-vente, and already at the tender age of 23, Omega sent him to Africa to take over the local branch in Ghana. Before leaving for Africa, he marries his first love, Josiane, and after nearly 60 years, they're still together today. They have 2 children and have worked together since then. Across countries, across continents. His mission was always to transmit his passion and knowledge about watchmaking, so it is natural that he acted as co-founder of WOSTEP in Neuchâtel in 1966. He also accepted to go to South Africa to open and lead their school in Pretoria, where, many years before the abandon of apartheid, he successfully ran classes for all ethnics, with the approval of the government, of course. From south of the equator to the south of the Jura Mountains, some 10 years later, he returns to Switzerland to take the responsibility as director of WOSTEP, a post he held until his retirement in 2003. Under his leadership, WOSTEP opened 17 schools around the globe, and in 1986 becomes an association before, thanks to him, it developed into an international partnership in 1994. By the time of his retirement, students could graduate in French, English, German, but also Japanese and Mandarin, and all this around the globe. His mission, shall I say, was always to share his knowledge, his know-how, and to perpetuate the skills of watchmaking and its history. Hence, logically, later in his life, and especially starting with the quartz crisis, he was chasing rare and out-of-print books about collectors, about watchmaking, and it was normal that sooner or later his students, his fellow teachers, collectors would ask him, could you find me this and could you find me that? And what started in the basement of the family home later became something much, much bigger. Today, he and his family are running, I believe, the world's richest, best equipped watchbook library and online, mostly, store in the world. He translated and re-edited the essential schoolbook by François Lecoultre about complicated watches. He was awarded numerous prizes, including in 1995 the Prix Gaia Prize. And we, the jury, wanted to thank him and celebrate a man who never put himself first forward, but the aspect of sharing, of transmitting, of perpetuating the knowledge and know-how and the history of watchmaking. First as a watchmaker, then teacher, expert, historian, collector, publisher, bookstore owner, and so on. Throughout these years, I can testify myself, he remained humble, accessible, and a very nice chap to spend time with. In short, I think he's the best friend the Swiss and the international watchmaking industry could have asked for to have in the last 60 years. J'ai encore une minute?
Vous êtes le patron.
I promised I would tell you how the winner of tonight's Prix Spécial du Jury and I met. Must have been in the mid-1980s. I was younger than the two men here before. And my father, who still is a collector of vintage watches, and I rented at the Zurich Watch Show a little table to sell a few doublons, as we say. And at one point, my father says, I go and have a coffee and a croissant at the buffet. Stay here, young boy. And I stayed there. And of course, the inevitable happened. And the man comes and says, what is this in the table? And I had to explain him the watch, the escapement, the case, the dial, etc., as good as I could. My father comes back with the gobelet and the croissant and sees how the young boy is handling the stand. And the man approaches him, they didn't know each other, and said, you see that young man, how he's talking about watches? My father says, yes. He's probably going to do a very good career in watches one day. And my father says, how can you judge that? And he takes out his business card, and he would say, Director of WOSTEP, Antoine Simonin.
Antoine Simonin, bravo. Antoine Simonin n'a pas pu venir. Voilà, on l'a prévu cet après-midi. On a envoyé nos équipes de retour de Pennsylvanie sont allées directement chez lui. Quelques mots du magnifique Antoine Simonin. Merci beaucoup.
Was not able to be with us, but we sent our teams to interview him.
Quelle surprise!
Good evening, Geneva. What a surprise this is for me to receive this prestigious Grand Prix. First of all, I would like to thank the judges and the team of the Grand Prix de l'Horlogerie de Genève. Here and now, I would like to thank those who have trusted me, who've had confidence in me for all my training activities. And I would like to thank the people all over the world who take care of the after-sales service of our watches. They're an important link in the chain for the future of our industry. Today, it is not just me, it is the watchmaker and repairer who has been honored by the award of this prize.
Horloger Rabilleur, c'est magnifique. Merci, Président Elbach. Merci,
profession
Antoine Simonin.
and crafts and industry.
Voilà.